Ravens tight end Isaiah Likely will be the next star tight end in your dynasty leagues. We'll explain why on this episode of the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast.
You are Locked On Dynasty Football, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. Here are your hosts, Marcus Mosher and Kate Madjuk.
Welcome back to the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. This episode is brought to you by PrizePicks. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use promo code LockedOnNFL, all lowercase, to win $50 instantly after you play $5. Welcome back. I am your host, Marcus Mosher. You can follow me on Twitter at Marcus_Mosher. Joining me today, as always, is Kate Madjuk. You can follow her on Twitter at Kate Madjuk. On today's show, we are breaking down the AFC Divisional round games. And Kate, I want to start with the Ravens Bills. I'm still warming up after that Bills Ravens game. I mean, I was at home watching the game, but it looked really cold. I want to talk about the tight ends for the Ravens, and actually, I don't want to spend too much time on Mark Andrews, who had maybe the worst game of his career with a fumble and the drop 2-point conversion. Instead, I want to talk about Isaiah Likely, who was 4 for 73 and a touchdown. This is the second straight game in which he led the Ravens in receiving yards. Is it time to start thinking about Isaiah Likely as a potential league winner at the tight end position?
Yeah, I think so. I think we're seeing Isaiah Likely every time there's some sort of need in this Ravens offense for a receiver to step up. It's not usually these wide receivers that are further down the pecking order. It's not a Nelson Aguilar. It's not a Anthony Miller, though he had, a fine catch. It's Isaiah Likely.
Yeah.
And you know what? He's really good. With the ball in his hands, we're seeing some really impressive production, especially after the catch. 6.1 yards after the catch per reception this year, matching Mark Andrews in terms of yards per reception average, despite the fact that he is technically a backup tight end.
Yeah.
3 fewer explosive plays than Mark Andrews on the year. Only 3 fewer explosive plays. The yardage, the touchdown production. I mean, it's all far too similar, I think, for the gap in terms of like their position on the team. Isaiah Likely is just getting it done with less opportunities. And you have to wonder if, at some point the Ravens kind of look like, all right, well, Isaiah Likely kind of feels like the future at the position. Mark Andrews, I don't want to say it's like been a terrible season. I mean,
no, because it hasn't been.
It hasn't been a terrible season, but I think the perception for me was that Mark Andrews and Lamar Jackson just kind of had this flawless connection that was always going to bail them out. It just doesn't feel like that's as guaranteed at this point.
So including the postseason, so that's 19 games for Mark Andrews. Do you know how many times he went over 70 receiving yards? The answer is 0. He did not do it once this year. Isaiah Likely just did it this week against the Bills. Now, I don't think the Ravens are going to cut Mark Andrews. And again, I know he had a really bad game. The fumble probably cost him. The 2-point drop absolutely cost them. But I remember you and I talking about, early in the year, maybe Mark Andrews could be somebody that the Ravens could trade, save a little bit of money, or get some draft capital back and continue to reinvest in this offense. Isaiah Likely is going into the final year of his contract in 2025. I don't see him as a guy that they're going to want to lose at all. He is 24 years old. Meanwhile, Mark Andrews is going to be 30 before week 1. I think this would be a good opportunity for the Ravens to try to get a little bit younger, more explosive on offense. And I do see Isaiah Likely, whether it's in 2025 or 2026, being a guy that you want in your lineup every single week. He's gotten better in each of the last couple seasons. He is somebody that I want to continue to invest in. And when he becomes a full-time tight end and when he's not splitting snaps with Mark Andrews, I do think he's somebody that could give us 800, 900 yards a season with double-digit touchdown upside.
I think we're just seeing him be a little bit more explosive. And I think, his explosive playmaking ability is something that, I think he offers a little bit more juice than we're getting out of Mark Andrews. He's in his age 28 season, will turn 29 next year. But I think there's one stat that I think is kind of an interesting, intriguing tell for me, that I just what I'm seeing from Isaiah Likely on the field does kind of match. 16.5% of Mark Andrews' targets this year, including the postseason, were considered contested targets per half. Only 6.2% of Isaiah Likely's targets are considered contested. And I think that that's just a testament to where he's at and his ability to generate separation. He is, I think, more of that receiver tight end. Obviously, Mark Andrews more of the traditional inline kind of guy. But we I don't know, how.
I think Likely is the type of guy.
Feel like it's really hard to point the finger at Mark Andrews when, he just came off a season where he posted a career high in touchdowns, but it doesn't feel the same.
No, it does. And that's why I wouldn't be surprised if Baltimore does try to move him this offseason, because you can see that the numbers wise, he's still productive, but he's not the same player that we saw 2, 3, 4 years ago. And I think Isaiah Likely has a chance to be that guy. Just go with the young guy, go with the guy that gives you more explosive plays and the guy that can make plays after the catch. And I wanted to talk about Rashad Bateman, Kate, in this game, because Rashad Bateman had another really strong game, 5 targets, 4 catches, 66 yards and a touchdown. Kate, he's been one of the more sneaky, efficient players. Baltimore re-signed him this offseason. I think it was a 2-year, $12 million deal, including the postseason, 11 touchdowns this season. Again, he's only 25 years old. Zay Flowers will obviously be back at the start of week 1 next year. But Rashad Bateman is somebody that I just think he's been able to stay healthy, which has been one of the biggest knocks on him. And you're starting to see Lamar Jackson gain a lot of trust in Bateman. I think Bateman is somebody that moving forward, pretty solid flex play every single week.
I'm going to give you a fun stat. Rashad Bateman only has 3 fewer explosive plays, that's plays of 15 plus receiving yards, than Zay Flowers all year long, averaging 16.6 yards per reception. He's being targeted pretty deep down the field, 15.2 ADOT. That's pretty significant. 24.3% of his targets are going deep down the field. Now, he's not being targeted on a high percentage of those targets, but when he is, that connection with him and Lamar Jackson has been incredibly efficient. And I do think that we're finally starting to see the receiver, now that he's been healthy. I think this is the player that the Ravens drafted. They ended up locking him up long term. He did get that second contract with the team. I think you probably have to admit that he's closer to a flex play any given week, especially when you're tied to an MVP quarterback. I don't know. I think Rashad Bateman's starting to feel more and more like a really nice dynasty value. He's not going to be a guy that you're going to lock into your lineup every single week. But I do think for especially I'm considering some of these leagues where I've got 4 flex spots, right?
Yep.
Rashad Bateman, if he's healthy, he's one of these guys that I could picture just leaving in the flex, right? In some of these deeper leagues. And there are going to be occasions where he wins you a week thanks to that touchdown production.
Guess where he was being drafted in the month of December on Dynasty League football? Just among receivers. Where do you think he was going?
Wide receiver 60.
Boom. Exactly. Wide receiver 60. Yeah. And that's the thing is you're getting, I think we've cleared up now. He is the clear cut wide receiver 2. There's nobody else out there that's going to challenge him for spots. It's clear that Lamar Jackson is trusting him more and more. Jackson's becoming a much better passer. You get the number 2 receiver on arguably the best offense in the NFL at wide receiver 60 prices. Sign me up. All right, Kay, let's talk about the Bills side of things. Not a ton of takeaways, but there was one player who I didn't see make a big impact at all. Let's talk about Keon Coleman next. This episode is brought to you by LinkedIn. Growing your small business in 2025 comes down to how well that you can hire. And let's face it, better hires start with smarter insights. And that's where LinkedIn comes in. With the strongest hiring data available, LinkedIn helps you identify the right candidates, giving you the confidence to make the best decisions for your business. I've used LinkedIn Jobs myself, and I can tell you that it's an absolute game changer when it comes to hiring the right fit. Small businesses are wearing so many hats, so every hire is crucial, and LinkedIn gets that. That's why they want to connect you with the best candidates using data that you won't find anywhere else. From unique skills and interests to the connections you share, LinkedIn helps you find the right person for the job. In fact, 72% of small businesses say LinkedIn has helped them find high-quality candidates. Hire smarter this year and find your next great hire on LinkedIn. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That is linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. This episode is brought to you by PrizePicks. It's playoff time, and if you're like me, you want to enjoy the most out of these final 2 weeks of football action, and that's where PrizePicks comes in. If you love football and want a chance to win real money while watching the games, PrizePicks is the place for you. It is the best way to turn your sports opinions into cash with daily fantasy player projections. And with PrizePicks, you simply pick more or less on player stats like total passing yards or rushing touchdowns for a shot to win up to 1,000 times your money. You can make your picks in less than 60 seconds. And whether you're looking for a flex play to boost your payout or just want to cash out quickly, PrizePicks has got you covered. And with over 10 million members and billions in winnings, it's clear that people are loving this platform. Here is a special offer for Locked On Dynasty Football listeners. Download the app today. Use promo code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Again, you can get $50 instantly when you play your first $5 lineup by using promo code LOCKEDONNFL. PrizePicks, run your game. Welcome back to the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. Okay, let's talk about the Bills side of things. This wasn't a huge game for the Bills on offense. Their total yardage was like 250 in this game. I did want to mention Keon Coleman, though. 1 catch for 5 yards on 1 target. Now, he did draw a big pass interference call, although I think
that was definitely OPI, but okay, we'll talk about it.
Yeah. Here's my concern with Keon Coleman. We talked about him, I believe it was on Friday's show, as Coleman is somebody that has a chance throughout these playoffs to really raise his dynasty value. But I think he's done the opposite. Through 2 games, 2 catches for 10 yards, just hasn't been a big factor in the offense at all. What's going on with Keon Coleman?
I think this is the Keon Coleman effect. I don't think, and this is me being biased, perhaps. I know Keon Coleman has a history of making some of these big boom splash plays. His highlight reel coming out of college was absolutely insane. I mean, you could just throw it on and you could see why a playmaker like Josh Allen would get enamored with a playmaker like Keon Coleman. However, my biggest concern with Keon Coleman has always been the routine stuff on a down-to-down basis that I'm going to be honest, like Keon Coleman feels like he would have been a great fit for the Wild Wild West version of Josh Allen, who played football like 3 or 4 years ago.
When we had Kelvin Benjamin out there. Yes.
Yeah. Like I feel like that would have been the perfect fit. But I do think that this year we saw a very mature version of Josh Allen. This has been the cleanest football he has played in his career. I mean, you can't argue that this, despite the fact that, like, yeah, he might not be playing hero ball quite as often. Still plenty of highlight plays from Josh Allen, but like he's playing smarter football. And sometimes smarter football doesn't mean throwing to the guy who can't get open. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, and we knew that Coleman was going to be a project coming out of Florida State. He was 20 years old. But I don't think Josh loves to throw to guys that are covered. I think that's why Khalil Shakir, who is not nowhere near the physical specimen of Keon Coleman, leads his team in targets every week. And in this game, 7 targets, 6 catches for 67 yards because he gets open and he catches everything that's thrown to him. I think my takeaway with this Buffalo offense is Buffalo clearly felt like they needed to add playmakers this offseason. And that's why they spent a high second-round pick on Keon Coleman. It's why they traded for Amari Cooper. It's why they added Curtis Samuel. But I just don't think their offensive philosophy is to lean heavily on any of these guys in any single, over more than one game, right? It seems like it's very much matchup dependent. And if that continues, and I think it will because it's been highly successful for them, I'm not sure I want anybody else on this offense outside of Josh Allen and James Cook because it's just so hard to rely on them. Even Dalton Kincaid, who was a first-round pick at tight end, 1 catch for 11 yards yesterday. And if you look at his production through the 2 playoff games right now, Kate, he's got 4 catches for 58 yards. Nothing.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. And, let's go back to these contested catch data points here from PFF. There is not a single receiver on this Buffalo Bills offense with a higher percentage of his targets that are considered contested per PFF. 31.7% of his targets are considered contested in comparison to Khalil Shakir, 13.9%.
Yeah.
Khalil Shakir gets open, and I think that's just a better fit for the type of football Josh Allen is playing right now. Also considering the reliability factor for Keon Coleman, 13.2% of his targets have been drops, 51.7% completion percentage. Like, he's getting some of these kind of, I think he's playing the kind of role I expected Keon Coleman to play. 33.3% of his targets are considered deep. And that's a nice chunk of his deep targets that can be conducive to a high upside role, but it's not going to be conducive to efficiency on an every down basis. And again, I think Josh Allen has kind of matured past that role. There's still a little cowboy in him, but the cowboy just makes fewer appearances than he did 3 or 4 years ago.
It reminds me a lot of like early career Tom Brady, and not in the sense of like Josh Allen's such a better runner than Tom Brady. What I mean is like where Tom Brady would win these Super Bowls and nobody on the offense would have more than 700-yard receiving. Like they would adjust the game plan and use the players that make sense that week. And I think Buffalo has figured out a really good way to build their offense so they're not overly dependent on any one player outside of Josh Allen. Until that changes, or until one of these players becomes so much better than everybody else, I'm going to have a hard time buying into any of the receivers in Buffalo's offense. I don't want to give up on Keon Coleman because he's 21 years old and because he's got so much size. But at wide receiver 37 right now in your dynasty leagues, there's just no way that I can get behind that.
No, it's definitely the price. And again, I think we all appreciate the kind of upside that Keon Coleman can have. Because, I mean, again, kind of look at their resumes separately and you see the upside on both players. And you're like, well, okay, put them together. That should be, something pretty fantastic. But I do think the floor for a Keon Coleman is much lower than we're probably going to project for most of the rookies that came out in this class, despite the fact that that he's tied to a really good quarterback. I think the play style just makes it that much more difficult to buy in. And right now, I mean, give me Jalen McMillan over, a Keon Coleman pretty easily. Give me, I don't know, name some other fringe players. Ricky Pearsall. How do you feel about Ricky Pearsall in comparison to?
I mean, I don't love Ricky Pearsall. I wasn't a big fan of Ricky Pearsall coming out of Florida, but it's the same kind of thing. It's like I don't trust either of them right now. Coleman is We'll see what Coleman's price is this offseason. Generally, Kate, what we see is that these year 2 receivers, especially guys that are drafted inside the top 50, almost always get an offseason bump. I'll be curious to see if that happens with Keon Coleman. Let's talk about this Chiefs-Texans game, the game that felt like it happened about 50 days ago. I want to talk about Isiah Pacheco, who got outsnapped by Kareem Hunt. We will get to that next. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. From the first whistle to the final drive, FanDuel makes the NFL playoffs even more exciting. And right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if you win your first bet. That is $300 to keep the action going. The FanDuel app is so easy to navigate, and the variety of bets keeps getting better every single week. Plus, when you win, you get paid instantly. No waiting around for your winnings, whether you're betting on your favorite team or just looking to add some extra drama and excitement to the championship round. FanDuel has got you covered. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today, and you'll get started with $300 in bonus bets. That is FanDuel.com. Go check out all of the lines and odds available for championship round of the NFL playoffs, and make this NFL playoff season unforgettable with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Welcome back to the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen every single day. For your second listen, check out the new Locked On NFL show. 2 shows every single day, one in the morning with Tyler Rowland, one in the afternoon with Tony Wiggins, available wherever you get your podcasts. All right, Kate, let's talk about Chiefs-Texans. Not a ton of takeaways in this one. Stroud and Mixon and Nico basically have done what they did all season. But on the Chiefs side of things, we got playoff Travis Kelce back. We don't need to discuss that one. But I do want to talk about Isiah Pacheco. 5 carries for 18 yards in this game, no receptions. It was Kareem Hunt who got 8 carries for 44 yards and a touchdown. It was Kareem Hunt who was involved in the passing game. What do we make of Isiah Pacheco?
I mean, I have some serious concerns about Isiah Pacheco, just in general. Now, I'm not here to say that I don't love the player. Super, super fun to watch. Runs like every carry is going to be his last in the NFL, but health has been a significant issue for Isiah Pacheco. Came back from a lower leg injury and successfully came back. Ended up dealing with a rib injury toward the end of last year. He's dealt with several shoulder injuries. It just always feels like there is a health issue here with Isiah Pacheco. And I do think that we're starting to see that bear out. Like, the Chiefs will always have to be abundantly cautious, I think, when it comes to Isiah Pacheco. He's never going to be a guy that I think that they can trust to give 20 plus touches any given game. I said this as soon as we saw Kareem Hunt come back into this offense. Kareem Hunt off the couch totaled more touches in a game than Isiah Pacheco has ever had, healthy or not, with the Kansas City Chiefs. I think that the circumstances here are pointing to the fact that, the Chiefs are very much a team that I could picture being in the market for a running back. I mentioned, I could totally picture Najee Harris coming into this offense and absolutely balling out. And I could see the Chiefs liking the fit because he's been so reliable from a health standpoint. Also a team that I could picture investing heavily in the draft. I think we have to seriously worry about Pacheco's general upside. And Marcus, you look at the dynasty value. Pacheco's been valued as a top 15 dynasty running back here for quite some time. And I think it's time we got to back off, y'all. Got to back off.
So listen to Pacheco's carries since returning to the lineup. 14 against the Chargers, 13 against the Browns, 9 against the Texans the first time they played, 6 against the Steelers, 0 against Denver, 5 against Houston. His workload has been decreasing every single week. And yet it's Kareem Hunt who continues to get the work in this backfield. Now, we're not saying that the Chiefs are going to move on from Isiah Pacheco. And I think it's pretty clear that the injury is still bothering him. He has not averaged 4 yards per carry in the last 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 weeks. Like, it's been a long time, but he is going to be a free agent at the end of the 2025 season, right? So we got one more year left. But you look at this draft, and this is what we've been saying about this draft coming up for a long time, is that there very easily could be 12 running backs that are drafted in the first 2 days of the draft. Well, the Chiefs just so happen to have pick, let's say 64 if they win the Super Bowl, and they have one of the top picks in the second round, pick 66 after the L'Jarius Sneed trade. They also own pick 95, 96, depending on where they finish. I think in this class with so much talent at the running back position, you're going to see the Chiefs draft a guy sometime on day 2, pair him with Isiah Pacheco, and then we'll see what this backfield looks like in 2025. But I have no interest in buying him this offseason. And if you can sell him for top 20 running back prices, I think you do that in a heartbeat.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do also want to give the caveat, like, let's not forget, he did have a fibula fracture, which, we saw, let's consider Tony Pollard, for example, suffered a lower leg fracture and took him a little bit of time to kind of reacclimate and I think regain that burst that he initially had that made him so special. So I wouldn't be surprised if we're also seeing that kind of be a component in some of his inefficiencies. But when you look at the salary, you always have to consider for these players, what is the investment from the team's perspective? The team investment in Isiah Pacheco is not a significant financial one. It is not a significant draft one. This is a team that I think, they found a really suitable answer at the running back position at a great value, but somebody who I think, like, when I'm considering, okay, what spots could they upgrade, right? Running back is always the top of my list. And I do think that, it's kind of hard when you can't count on this guy's health, especially to,
it's rough. I do want to mention one more thing on the Chiefs side. Xavier Worthy didn't have a huge game, 5 catches for 45 yards. He was involved in the offense. However, DeAndre Hopkins, Hollywood Brown, Juju Smith-Schuster, and the rest of the wide receiver core combined for 0 catches. So I think that just shows you the trust that the Chiefs have in Xavier Worthy as a rookie. They understand they need to get him the ball. These type of performances, even though they're not big fantasy days, make me feel more confident about Worthy moving forward, because it's clear that Andy Reid trusts him, Patrick Mahomes trusts him, and I want to trust him in my lineups. Any thoughts on the receivers before we head out?
Yeah, I think it's definitely the usage here. And let's not forget that they're going to have a massive overhaul at the wide receiver position. Rashee Rice, devastating knee injury, also could be dealing with the suspension. Like, there's really no doubt in my mind, if you're asking me to project 2025, Xavier Worthy, barring any sort of injury, is leading this team in, receptions, receiving yards, probably receiving touchdowns, at least heading into the playoffs. I think Xavier Worthy is the future of this team, and he's right now being valued wide receiver 30 on
Steal.
Dynasty League Football.
Considering where Keon Coleman is at, absolute steal. Go buy Xavier Worthy this offseason. All right, that is it for today's show. We want to thank you for making Locked On Dynasty Football your first listen every single day. Go check out the show on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast. We are free and available on all platforms. Follow Kate on Twitter at Kate Majuk. I'm at Marcus_Mosier, and we will see you right back here tomorrow.